My name is Ariana Cooper. I'm 31 years old, and I live in a quiet apartment complex on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. Just 6 months after my wedding to Lucas Hayes, my entire world shifted. I officially became the heir to 3 incredible upscale apartments, a gift from my amazing grandmother, Ruth Simmons. But here's the kicker, I didn't tell anyone. Not Lucas, not his family, not a single soul. We had this small, beautiful ceremony at the end of fall, surrounded by fiery red and golden leaves. Lucas held me in that chapel, right between the rows of wooden pews, and he promised we'd build everything from scratch together. I remember smiling, but deep down, I knew my scratch wasn't his scratch. Ruth, my grandmother, was the strongest woman I've ever known. She grew up in a time when women weren't exactly encouraged to be financially independent, but after her husband passed away early, she raised 2 kids on her own and built this incredible real estate portfolio. I honestly thought she only owned that one small, tidy apartment where she lived, with the balcony overlooking Sloan's Lake. But the truth? She had been quietly buying and accumulating property for over 30 years, almost like she never wanted anyone to know. The day she passed, I couldn't even get out of bed. That loss was a deep, slow ache inside me. She wasn't just my last remaining family, she was the one who taught me everything, from how to write a proper letter to how to read a balance sheet. 6 weeks after her funeral, her attorney, Mr. Kenneth Doyle, called me to his office. I was expecting a few keepsakes, maybe her gold watch, some half-filled journals. Instead, he handed me a stack of papers, each one a deed of ownership. 3 apartments, a 2-bedroom penthouse downtown worth over $800,000, an upper-level unit near Washington Park valued at about $1 million, and the smallest one, where she had lived. I kept that one as my personal retreat. Altogether, these properties were worth more than $2 million. I was speechless. My hands trembled as I signed the paperwork. Kenneth looked at me, his voice gravelly, and said, "Ariana, your grandmother was very clear. These properties are yours, no one else's." And then he emphasized one thing, never let someone else decide for you when it comes to money, not even someone you love. At the time, I was still in the honeymoon phase, literally and emotionally. Lucas and I had just returned from our trip to New Orleans. He didn't question my reluctance to talk about finances. I gave some excuse about not being ready to merge accounts, and he just nodded as if that were entirely normal. But I knew better than anyone, money changes people. I'd had an ex-boyfriend, Sean, who quietly withdrew nearly $10,000 from our shared account to invest in some canned coffee startup he never even researched. Before him, there was Will, who always made me foot the bill because you earn more anyway. I'd learned those lessons through the bruises left on my trust. Lucas, of course, was different. He was gentle, patient, intelligent, a communications director at his family's real estate marketing firm. He came from what he called comfortable money, not flashy, as he once put it. But his mother, Veronica Hayes, was still a mystery I hadn't figured out. I had gone back and forth so many times. There were nights I lay wide awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, asking myself, was I starting this marriage on a lie, or was I doing the right thing, protecting myself before being drawn into a game I never wanted to play? In those moments, I always heard Ruth's voice whispering to me, just like when I was a child perched on a kitchen stool next to her, not everyone loves you for you. Sometimes, they love what you have. The sooner you can tell the difference, the less it'll hurt. I first met Veronica at what was described as an intimate dinner at the Hayes family estate, a white brick colonial home in Riverfront Park with a backyard larger than the entire apartment I lived in. She descended the staircase like it was a runway, wearing a beige Chanel blazer that hugged her frame and a Patek Philippe watch I'd only ever seen behind store glass. "So, you're Ariana?" she asked, her voice soft as a breath but sharp as a razor. "Lucas talks about you quite a bit." I shook her hand, feeling expensive lotion over cold, dry skin. She didn't smile, just tilted her head, eyes scanning me from head to toe like she was appraising an item at a private auction. Dinner was served in a walnut-paneled dining room with a crystal chandelier overhead. Veronica sat at the head of the table, Lucas to her left, and I was seated across from her, next to a centerpiece as large as a motorcycle helmet. "What is it that you do again?" she asked, just as the main course was served, her tone casual, like she was asking about the weather. "I manage content for a digital publishing platform," I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Ah, interesting," she said, finally smiling for the first time all evening. "That field, it's not the most stable, is it? I mean, not everyone lasts more than 5 years." I smiled and sipped my water. I was already used to these veiled interrogations wrapped in politeness. But what unsettled me were the questions that came next. "And where are your parents?" "They passed away. I was raised by my grandmother." "Ah, Ruth, right?" I froze. I had never mentioned my grandmother's name to Veronica, not once. "You know, I believe I met Ruth at a charity event a few years ago," she said, eyes fixed on her swirling glass of wine. I nodded, though something inside me went cold. "What event?" Ruth never attended those kinds of functions, she preferred gardening and financial newspapers. The dinner ended with stiff hugs and a polite invitation to drop by any time. But from the moment I stepped out of that house, I knew Veronica wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law, she was a controller. The following week, I received an email from someone named Lorna Fisk, claiming to be an old friend of Ruth's, inviting me to a financial planning seminar at the Oxford Hotel. Nothing about it seemed suspicious until I looked up her name and discovered she was a financial advisor who had once worked for the Hayes family company. I didn't respond, but 2 days later, I saw a strange man loitering outside my building, pretending to ask for directions but glancing repeatedly at the tenant directory. I wasn't being paranoid. I'd grown up with a woman who taught me, when someone takes too much interest in your assets, ask yourself what kind of debt they're drowning in. 3 days later, Lucas came home and tossed a stack of envelopes on the kitchen counter. "Mom sent this," he said. I opened it. Inside was a real estate market report from my neighborhood, along with a note, "Seems this area is going up fast. Don't let anyone pressure you to sell low." I stared at Lucas. "Did you tell her about this apartment?" "No, why?" "I think your mom is investigating me." Lucas laughed, then stopped when he realized I wasn't joking. "You're serious?" I nodded. For the first time, he looked unsure. The next morning, while making coffee, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Is this Ariana Cooper?" "Yes. I'm an assistant to Mrs. Veronica Hayes' attorney. She'd like to arrange a private meeting to discuss long-term financial planning within the family." I tightened my grip on the phone. I have no obligation to discuss my personal finances with anyone other than my husband. She believes the meeting will help clarify your long-term commitments. I hung up, heart pounding. It felt like invisible hands were reaching into my mind, trying to open a mental vault I had never meant to share. That evening, I dug out Ruth's old notebook. On a folded page, written in her shaky but unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "If someone wants control of your assets, they don't love you. They're just testing to see where you're weakest." Lucas left Denver early Monday morning for a marketing conference in San Diego. Before he left, he kissed my forehead and said, "Try to be kind to my mom, okay?" "She's trying." I nodded reluctantly. I didn't want more tension, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was being targeted. The first 3 days of his absence passed in blessed silence. I used the time to inspect the plumbing in the lakefront apartment that once belonged to Grandma Ruth, updated the rent ledger for the other 2 properties, and caught up on accounting paperwork. Everything was under control until Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I thought it was food delivery, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw Veronica standing there in an ivory overcoat with a luxury leather handbag tucked under her arm. Beside her was a gray-haired man in a dark suit holding a slim leather briefcase. His expression was polite but blank. I opened the door, one hand still gripping the frame. "Hello, Ariana," she said, her voice sweet like honey mixed with sedatives. "I hope I'm not intruding. I brought Mr. Nathaniel Reeves, our family notary. There are just a few documents we'd like you to look over." I didn't invite them in. "What kind of documents?" Oh, nothing major, she said, stepping past me like she owned the place. Just some asset protection paperwork to keep things safe and more efficient in the long run. Mr. Reeves followed, setting his briefcase on the dining table and pulling out a stack of paperwork. I still hadn't closed the door. The apartment suddenly felt cold despite the heater humming in the background. I understand Ruth left you a few properties, she said, settling into a chair like she was hosting afternoon tea. Nothing to be ashamed of. I just want to help you organize things properly. The Hayes family always uses a trust system to avoid taxes and unnecessary legal risk. I stared at the paperwork, dense with text, dry and cold as steel. I've never agreed to share my personal assets with anyone, I said, keeping my voice calm. And Lucas never mentioned anything about this. Oh, Lucas doesn't need to worry about these matters, she said gently, though her eyes were ice. It's just what we do. Even Tracy, Lucas's sister, transferred her home into the family trust when she got married. I clenched my fists. Are you asking me to sign everything I own over to you? Not to me, to the family, she corrected. The trust benefits everyone. Of course, Mr. Hayes and I are the trustees, but it protects us all. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked to the table and picked up one of the documents. The first thing my eyes landed on was Clause 4.3, full authority over assets shall remain with the trustee for the duration of the agreement. No, I said, placing the paper down. I'm not signing. This is property I inherited legally before I ever married. I won't give up control of it to anyone. Mr. Reeves raised an eyebrow. Veronica simply shrugged and pulled out a silk handkerchief, dabbing her hands like I had just dirted the table. I don't see why you're reacting so strongly, she said flatly. Being part of the Hayes family means respecting how we manage wealth. I looked her in the eye. Respect means not bringing a notary into someone's home uninvited. Remember, Lucas is the only son in the Hayes line. What you have affects the family estate. No, it's not our estate. And if you think Lucas would go behind my back to approve this, you don't know him at all. Right then, my phone rang. The screen lit up, Lucas. I answered and put him on speaker. Are you okay? Mom said she was stopping by. Lucas's voice was calm but cautious. She's sitting in the living room, I replied evenly, with a notary. They want me to sign papers to transfer Grandma Ruth's inheritance into your family's trust. A heavy silence followed. Lucas sighed. Mom, seriously? Lucas. Veronica cut in, still composed. I'm only doing what's best for the family. I'm coming home first thing tomorrow. You are not to pressure Ariana into signing anything. That is her property, not the Hayes estate, not yours. After he hung up, Veronica stood, her polite mask gone. You're playing a dangerous game, Ariana. I pressed my lips together. No, you just lost one. When the door shut behind them, I stood there for a long time, hands still trembling. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Veronica's cold stare as she left the apartment. She hadn't tried to persuade me, she'd issued a command. That eerie calm of someone who believed that with enough patience, the prey would eventually give in. But I wouldn't. The next morning, I got up early, brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and sent a short, urgent email to my personal attorney, Mr. Kenneth Doyle, who had once represented Grandma Ruth for years. Subject, urgent, securing independent ownership. Body, I was just pressured to sign documents transferring inherited assets to an external party. Please review and implement every possible legal safeguard immediately. Less than an hour later, he called. Ariana, do you still have the original documents? I have the notarized copies and signed duplicates from Ruth, dated before her passing. Good. Get them to me. I'll tighten the trust clauses and ensure every transaction requires two-factor verification. Can you add a condition that no asset transfer can be authorized without my in-person consent? Yes, I'll handle the legal part. But Ariana, be careful. People like Veronica Hayes don't just use paperwork. I hung up and exhaled deeply. Lucas would be home in a few hours. I didn't want to hide anything anymore, but I wasn't sure how he'd react. I didn't want this to become a battle between me and his mother. I needed him to see this for what it was, a blatant invasion of my privacy and financial independence. Lucas came back late in the afternoon. As soon as he walked in, he saw the document box I'd left on the table. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice rough from travel. I nodded. She brought a notary, laid the papers on the table, asked me to sign. He sat down, elbows on his knees, silent for a long time. Why would she do that? You should ask her. But this isn't the first time she's tried to control someone through money, is it? He didn't argue, just whispered, when she said she was dropping by, "Did you think she'd do something like this?" I suspected she was up to something. I just didn't think she'd act this fast or this bold. Lucas looked up. "Why didn't you tell me about the apartments?" I didn't dodge. I sat across from him, opened the folder, and laid out every paper: title deeds, rental income reports, the trust summary. Total value's about $2.5 million, I said evenly. 2 units are rented, about $6,500 a month. This one used to be Ruth's. I kept it to live in. I didn't say anything earlier because I wasn't sure where our relationship was heading, and because of what I'd been through. You thought I'd take advantage? No. But I know money can change people. I needed to be sure I could trust you, not just with love, but with boundaries. He bowed his head, fingers laced. My mom, she did this to my sister, to her husband. Tricked them into signing over their property into the family trust, then took control of their house shares. Tracy's never spoken up, afraid she'll be cut from the will. I raised an eyebrow. You knew that and you still let her get close to me? I didn't think she'd go this far. I thought she'd just test her limits. She blew right past them. Lucas looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that day. I won't let her interfere again. But you should know, I can't control her. I'm not asking you to control anyone, I replied, my voice low but steady. I just need to know which side you're on. We sat there in silence. No one won that conversation, but one thing was now certain: from this moment on, no one would ever lay a hand on my assets unless they went through me first. I stood, gathered the paperwork, and locked it in the wall safe. Lucas came up behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I never loved you for what you have. I turned to face him. Good. Because now you know exactly what I have, and I'm not letting anyone take it from me. Outside the window, the first flakes of snow began to fall. A storm was coming. 3 days after confronting my mother-in-law, I got a call close to 10 p.m. A number I didn't recognize, but something told me I shouldn't ignore it. Sorry to bother you this late, the man said cautiously. My name is Marcus Weller. I used to be the chief accountant at Hayes Media Group. I frowned. I'm not sure why you're calling me. I don't know if I should be doing this, but I think you need to know the truth about why Veronica's been so focused on your assets lately. I walked into the kitchen, locked the balcony door, and sat down. My heart was pounding. Go on. I resigned 3 weeks ago, forced to sign the letter after I refused to keep falsifying reports under Mr. Charles Hayes's direction, your father-in-law. I gripped the phone tighter. Hayes Media is drowning in debt. At least $600,000, partly from a failed investment in an undocumented streaming platform, but most of it, this will sound harsh, is from Charles's deep involvement in sports betting. I leaned back, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. They tried borrowing from banks, no success. Shares are falling, partners are backing out, and Veronica, she's been scrambling to collect enough collateral. You see where this is going? I did, all too clearly. She plans to use the property I inherited from my grandmother to cover their debt. Yes, they want to formalize control of your real estate through the family trust, then use it as collateral at Sterling Private Capital. I saw a draft of the filing. While it hasn't been signed yet, they intend to present it as provisional backing. I froze. Does Lucas know? I don't think so. They rarely let him near the financials. I thanked Marcus, carefully asked for more details, then hung up. I wasn't just furious, I was sharply focused. The next morning, I met with Kenneth Doyle at his office. I brought everything, Marcus's statement, the documents, all of it. Kenneth reviewed them, thoughtful and quiet. Then he said, "We need to do 3 things immediately. First, strengthen the ownership records on your inherited assets. Second, file a notarized legal disassociation between Ruth's trust and any third-party debt. Third, notify Sterling Capital in writing that these properties are entirely independent of the Hayes family's financial liability." When I got home, Lucas was on the couch, phone still in hand, face flushed. He ended the call and turned to me, his voice tight. "Did you say something to my mom about the company?" I walked over. "What did you hear?" Tracy called. "Mom's furious that someone threatened legal action if she listed your name on the collateral paperwork." "What are you doing?" I opened my laptop and showed him the files Kenneth had prepared, income reports from the 3 units, titles, non-transfer affidavits, and a draft loan proposal Veronica had sent the bank with my name listed under guaranteed assets. Lucas stared, speechless. I stayed silent. "Lucas," I said, "they tried to take what doesn't belong to them, behind my back and behind yours." He sank into a chair. "My dad's gambling again?" I nodded. "So deep he can't claw out, and the company is on the edge. Your mom knows, but instead of another way out, she chose to pawn off someone else's future to cover their mess." Lucas laced his fingers into his hair, laughing bitterly. "They always told me everything's fine, that I should just focus on creating. The money stuff was for the adults." I sat next to him. "You know what disappoints me the most?" He didn't answer. That I believed, even just a little, that staying quiet would help avoid conflict. I was wrong. Silence only makes them think they can get away with more. Lucas looked at me, not as a husband, but as a man caught between 2 worlds. "I'll talk to them," he said softly. "I can't let this go on. Not just talk. You have to choose a side, Lucas, because next time, they won't just borrow your name, they'll take the keys." I didn't need Ruth's advice anymore, I was living what she taught me. Silence never protects what is rightfully yours. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at my penthouse. The space that once held Grandma Ruth's peace now turned into a battleground for an unwanted negotiation. Lucas sat to my left, his face as tense as a drawn wire. Across from us was Veronica, composed to the point of coldness in a cream suit trimmed with black, while Charles, my father-in-law, sat beside her in a wrinkled shirt, his wrist slightly trembling. I opened my laptop and projected the draft of the legal document Kenneth had prepared. "I have conditions," I said plainly, without dancing around. 1 unit, the one in Park Hill, will be used as temporary collateral for the bank to review the rescue loan, but only if 3 conditions are met. Veronica placed a hand on the table, her expression openly skeptical. "What kind of conditions do you think you can set with someone like me?" Lucas turned toward her, his voice sharper than I had ever heard. "You should listen, because if Ariana doesn't agree, the company won't make it past next quarter." I looked straight at her. "First condition, Charles must enroll in an intensive gambling treatment program at Bridgewell Recovery Center. Not some surface-level outpatient program, this is a 45-day inpatient commitment. I already have the referral and address." Charles opened his mouth to object, but I shot him a look that made him stop cold. "Second, Lucas will withdraw from Hayes Media Group. He's accepted an offer to become the creative director at an independent media firm. No more financial entanglements with the family business." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "My son's quitting the family company because of his wife?" "No," Lucas replied firmly. "I'm leaving because I want to live by my values, not keep cleaning up the messes you've hidden from me for years." I continued. "And the final condition, you must write a formal letter of apology acknowledging your intrusion into my personal property." Additionally, you must commit to no further interference in my and Lucas's financial decisions from now on. Everything must be transparent, with signatures from both parties. The room fell silent. I knew for Veronica, this last part was the deepest cut. She had never bowed to anyone, let alone apologized. This has gone too far, I said slowly. If you want my help, you'll have to accept terms from the woman you once dismissed as not good enough to marry your son. Charles spoke up suddenly, his voice gravelly. I'll go to treatment. Not for the company, not for anyone else, but because I can't watch my family fall apart over some cheap gambling den in Boulder anymore. Under the table, Lucas gave my hand a slight squeeze. I turned to him, though his face was still solemn, I saw a hint of relief in his eyes. Veronica remained silent, her eyes narrowed, watching me like she was recalculating an opponent she hadn't expected. I'll write the letter, she said after several long seconds. But one more thing, I want to be present at future financial meetings related to the loan. I gave a quiet laugh. No, you're not a shareholder, and this time, you won't be the one holding the pen. Veronica stood. I've compromised more than enough today. No, I replied, you've just started to learn what respect looks like. As the two of them left, Lucas remained seated, quietly watching the late afternoon light spill across the wooden floor. He turned to me, his voice a whisper in the silence. You did what no one in my family has dared to do for 3 decades. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I didn't want to win anything. I just refused to be erased from my own life. We sat there in the fading light, saying nothing more. 1 month after that fateful meeting, things began to shift, slowly but unmistakably. Mr. Charles Hayes was admitted for treatment at Bridgewell during the first week of November. There was no send-off, no farewell family dinner, only Veronica silently accompanying her husband into the facility, her face stone cold but her hand trembling as she signed the inpatient commitment papers. Lucas left Hayes Media Group as scheduled, leaving behind only a short email. I am grateful for what I've learned at this company, but now it's time to begin a new journey, one with clear values and transparent boundaries. There was no bitterness in his words, but I knew each sentence cut deep into the structure Veronica had spent 3 decades building. He officially accepted a position at Greenlight Studio, a media company focused on environmental and educational campaigns. In the first few weeks, he came home every evening with a brightness in his eyes, one I hadn't seen since the first year of our marriage. As for me, I continued living in the penthouse Ruth left behind, but now that space was no longer a sanctuary, it had become a mini command center, managing 3 smoothly running properties. I hired a financial assistant named Lyle, a recent real estate management graduate from CU Denver. He was quick, meticulous, and completely discreet. Thanks to Lyle, I found a new tenant for the Park Hill unit, a middle-aged interior designer recently divorced, looking for a quiet place to start over. I understood that feeling better than most. Among all those changes, what surprised me most was Veronica. 3 weeks after Charles began his treatment, she called and asked to meet. Her voice was still formal, but no longer icy. I agreed to see her at a small cafe near Civic Center Park, a place I chose for its good lighting and open space, making it hard for anyone to apply pressure. She arrived on time, no assistant, no luxury blazer, just a light gray sweater, soft slacks, and her hair in a modest bun. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. Almost like a real person, I nodded. "I wanted to hear what you had to say." She was quiet for a moment, then pulled an envelope from her purse. "This is the original apology letter I sent by email. A printed copy, signed. Not for legal reasons. I want you to keep it as proof that I understand where I went wrong." I said nothing. She continued, "Charles isn't the man I married anymore, but most of the blame is mine. I covered for him, thinking that if I just held everything together hard enough, it wouldn't fall apart. But the harder I clung to it, the more I lost my family." I sat in silence, throat tight, not from emotion, but from sheer surprise. "Lucas was right," she went on. "Marriage isn't a merger. I treated it like a transaction and saw you as a threat to the structure I built. But now I realized that structure had been rotten for a long time. I stared at her for a long moment. For the first time, I didn't see the powerful Veronica Hayes, but a mother worn down and stripped bare. I don't need an apology to move on, I said. But I do need real change. I won't touch your assets again, she said firmly. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to make amends by contributing to the scholarship fund you mentioned last week. I raised an eyebrow. You remembered that? It's a brilliant idea. A fund for young women from single-parent homes, teaching them financial literacy, real estate investment. I nodded, finally smiling. If you truly want to contribute, this is the right way. On the way home that day, I felt something soften in me, not because everything was suddenly perfect. We were still two generations with different worldviews, but at least we were no longer on opposite sides of the battlefield. The following month, I was appointed content director at the publishing platform where I worked, a position I had thought would take at least 2 more years to reach. But maybe once you stand up for yourself, life clears the way for you in unexpected ways. One March morning, as the snow melted across the streets near Cheeseman Park, I set the pregnancy test down on the sink and stared at the 2 bright red lines. My first feeling wasn't panic or worry, but a stillness deep in my chest, like my body was trying to process something more sacred than logic. I stepped out of the bathroom, still holding the result, and saw Lucas reading emails on his laptop. I didn't say a word, just held up the test. He looked, froze for a second, then jumped up, wrapped his arms around me, and whispered in my ear, "We're about to have a little family, Ariana." For the past 3 years, we had made it through what I once believed were the final limits of patience and endurance. But those exact moments had taught me something Ruth once wrote in her journal: family isn't where you're born. It's what you choose to build with trust and healthy boundaries. A few weeks after I found out I was pregnant, Lucas and I began drafting plans to create a foundation in her name, the Ruth Simmons Foundation. We didn't want it to be just another scholarship fund. My goal was clear: to build a long-term program that helps girls and young women, especially those who grew up without a guiding figure, understand the value of financial independence. We started by moving a portion of the rental income from 2 apartments into an account reserved for the foundation. Then I reached out to a few friends working at community colleges across Colorado to find implementation partners. To my surprise, Veronica offered to make an initial investment, with no request for management rights or a name on the plaque. "Considerate grandma investing in the next generation of girls," she said quietly as I placed the grant contract on the table. "This time, I don't want control. I just want to witness." And I believed her, not because of empty promises, but because of action. She had started attending counseling sessions on power dynamics in marriage and independent boundaries. As for Charles, after 60 days of treatment, he officially declared he was done with all gambling activities and handed over company control to the independent board Lucas proposed. As for me, pregnancy didn't slow me down. If anything, it made me even more determined to build a legacy that wasn't just financial. I invited 3 young girls from our foundation's pilot program to visit Ruth's old apartment, where I still lived, and told them about the woman who did everything without asking anyone's permission. One of the girls, named June, shyly asked me, "Do you think I could learn to invest like Ruth?" She didn't have a college degree but still made it. I smiled. "You don't need a degree to start, just knowledge and determination, and you already have both." Lucas stood on the balcony, his hands resting on my belly, now clearly showing through my knitted dress. The sunset cast long shadows across the wooden floor where Ruth used to sit and read the paper, now where my child would soon take their first steps. We had made a plan: I would take a year off work after giving birth to focus on the foundation and our family. Lucas would continue developing projects at Greenlight but dedicate 3 evenings a week to parenting and infant care classes. One night as we lay quietly in the dark, Lucas whispered, "I used to think my greatest assets were the family company or my industry connections, but now I know it's you and what you believe in." I didn't respond. I just took his hand and placed it on my belly where a tiny heartbeat was steadily forming. Ruth once said, "Success isn't measured by wealth, but by how many people you help stand on their own 2 feet." And I, Ariana Cooper, am walking the path she left behind, not just to protect what I built, but to pass on its values to the next generation, starting with the child growing inside me and every young girl I can reach through the foundation named after the woman who changed my life with her quiet, unwavering strength. My story isn't just about protecting an inheritance, it's about reclaiming my voice and setting boundaries within a family built on pressure and control. From pain, I learned to stand up, set clear conditions, and rebuild everything on mutual respect. Today, I haven't just preserved what my grandmother left behind, I've turned it into a foundation that helps young women learn financial independence, so no one has to stay silent the way I once did. What do you think about how Ariana protected her legacy and redefined boundaries with her family? Would you have done it differently? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and personal choices.